All right. Well, welcome everyone to our September 20th, 2022 Marina City Council meeting. We did not have a closed session, but we do have a new city attorney representative with us tonight. Janie Quinn. Did I say that right, Janie?
Yes, Janie Quinn.
Janie Quinn. Thank you very much. All right. So without the closed session, we'll have a roll call, if we could, please, Anita.
Councilmember Medina Dirksen, Councilmember Berkeley, Councilmember Burnett,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Biala,
Here.
Mayor Delgado.
Here. All right, thank you. So there's three of us, city council electeds present, and perhaps Councilmember Berkeley or Councilmember Medina Dirksen will join us shortly. So can we have a volunteer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance after a moment of silence? All right, our city manager, Lane Long, has volunteered. So let's have a moment of silence. And then Lane, if you could lead us in the pledge, that'd be appreciated.
Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you very much, Lane. We're going to move into special announcements and communications from the public. Anyone wishing to give us an update of events coming up or tell us something that's on your mind that's not on tonight's agenda, we'll get going there. And let's start with Lisbeth Vischer. Good evening, Lisbeth.
Good evening, everybody. You surprised me by being so fast. I will try to read this. Good evening, everybody. I'm Lisbeth Visser, Chair of Citizens for Just Water. I would like to ask the residents of Marina to mark their calendars for Thursday, November 17. On that day, the Coastal Commission will have a hearing for KLM's proposed desal project. When you hear desal, you think it's a fantastic way to get enough water because we have an ocean full of it just next door. But KLM slant wells will pump some of the water from the aquifers under our city, and that is the only drinking water source for Marina Coast Water District, our public water company. KLM, a private for-profit company, will sell the desalinated water to their customers on the peninsula. Marina will not get a drop of that water. The project will contaminate our drinking water source due to seawater intrusion. So please check out our website to get informed, www.citizensforjustwater.org. On the website, you can also read about what this project would mean for our shoreline at the Cemex site, where Marina could hopefully get a beautiful, pristine beach back to nature when that sand mining plant finally disappears. Please check our website, www.citizensforjustwater.org. And also, we are back with our Just Water booth at the Marina Farmers Market every Sunday from 10 to 2. Please visit us there, have your photo taken with the Snowy Plover poster, and we can ask you to give comments on November 17 at the Coastal Commission meeting, either in person in Salinas, hopefully also in Marina, where they might live stream the comments again, or on Zoom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisbeth. Would anyone else from the public wish to speak? If so, just raise your hand. All right, we'll give everyone another moment, and then we'll close public comment. Okay, let's go ahead and close public comment. And since we have no public hearings, we'll move into our consent agenda. Lane Long, our city manager, is our consent agenda unchanged, or does anything need to be removed from it?
It's unchanged right now.
Okay. Don't see any members of the public raising their hands, so would anyone on city council like to make a motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda?
Second.
Right. Any comments before we go to a vote? Then Anita, if we could please have a roll call?
Councilmember Medina Dirksen,
Yes.
Councilmember Burnett,
Yes.
Councilmember Berkeley,
Yes.
Mayor Protem Biala,
Yes.
Mayor Delgado.
Yes, thank you. That motion passes 4-0 unanimously. We've been joined by Councilmember Christina Medina Dirksen, and 5-0, I'm sorry, and also Councilmember Lisa Berkeley. So we're all here now, just in time to go to our action agenda. Lane, did you want to introduce, or Brian McMahon, our Public Works Director, introduce these items?
Yes, Brian will be handling both of these items.
Good evening, Brian.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, these two items are related and need to be considered in light of each other. The first item is MOU for funding of an odor study between Monterey One Water and Regen Monterey and the city of Marina. And that item, that MOU will provide for the funding of an odor attribution study in the amount of $150,000. And that money is needed to actually, for city council to consider approving an agreement for professional services to actually conduct the odor attribution study. So we have our assistant engineer, assistant civil engineer, Saber Machinas, has a presentation to present to the city council and the public. We can kind of make the presentation for both items, but we can also make the presentation on the MOU and then open it up for city council questions, public comments, and action on that item, or we can actually do the presentation for both of them. I understand it's going to be maybe a little bit difficult to kind of manage the questions between the two, but they are two separate items on the agenda. And so a lot of work has gone into this, a lot of concerns with the public about odors in and around Marina, and particularly north of Marina. There's been a lot of there's been a public meeting with people weighing in on, what possible sources might be. A lot of concerns raised on social media and through email directed to city council and city staff. And I think, with the direction of city council to issue a request for proposals on this, with the understanding that the neighboring agencies are willing to actually pay for this study. We're kind of marching down this path to answer the question of, what are the sources of these odors. I guess with that, unless there's any input from the mayor on how we want to tackle this, I can turn it over to Saber Machinas to do the presentation in whole or in part.
So to recap, we have two items. One is a document called a Memorandum of Understanding, and the second is a document that would basically hire a firm to do the study.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, the presentation that's prepared, will it include a once through of the Memorandum of Understanding so that we would know everyone's role?
The first part, yes, does cover that, and we can have a pause at that point and address this as one item. If there are concerns or questions that lead over to the actual study itself, we're prepared to answer those.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do it as cohesively as possible. and then we'll vote on each item separate once all the questions, et cetera, are behind us.
Saber, if you could go ahead with the presentation and we'll answer questions after that.
Welcome, Saber. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Delgado, City Council. First, I apologize. I have my daughter with me, so if you hear any noise, that's from her. She's here. So it's a brief presentation about odor attribution study. My name is Saber Mescenas, Assistant Civil Engineer from the Department of Public Works. About the agenda items, we have two items. Item 11A, approve the Memorandum of Understanding MOU for odor attribution study between the region, Monterey, Monterey One Water, and the City of Marina. And item 11B, approve a professional services agreement between the City of Marina and SCS Engineers for environmental services for the odor attribution study project. Regarding the MOU, City of Marina and MBARD received a number of odor complaints in recent years. And to address this issue, a public meeting was held on January 27, 2021, with participants from MBARD, Region, M1 Water, County of Monterey Health Department, experts in agriculture and composting in the City of Marina. And the outcome of that meeting was that to identify the need to identify the sources, we need to do an odor attribution study. Region and M1 Water provided or agreed to provide $50,000 each for the study's expenses, and staff prepared a memorandum of understanding between Region, M1 Water, and the City of Marina. Through the consultant section, through the consultant selection and negotiation of the scope of the study, it's determined that the cost of the study would be $150,000. And according to the draft of MOU, the city is responsible for issuing the RFP, hiring consultant, and performing the study. Also, Region and M1 Water will reimburse the city for the project's expenses up to $75,000 per agency, and in a total amount of $150,000. Regarding the odor study, on April 19, 2022, City Council approved resolution number 2022-49 to release an RFP for hiring consultant to conduct an odor attribution study. Staff issued an RFP on May 17 and received two proposals from SCS Engineers and Montrose Environmental. The proposal were reviewed and rated by a panel including representatives from MBARD, County of Monterey Health Department, a representative from Citizen of Marina, and the City of Marina. Based on the interview sessions and evaluation process on July 8th, the SCS Engineers was selected as the most qualified firm. City and MBARD staff and a citizen representative negotiated the scope of the study, which was shared with Region Monterey and M1 Water as justification for additional needed funds. The total cost of the SCS Engineers proposal is $150,000. The study will be conducted over 7 months, and it will include 3 months of review for the data and information gathered in recent years, and 4 months of field sampling, analysis program, and reporting. Also, the scope of work will include initial review of information, review of complaint data for region, M1 water, MBART, and the city, meteorological analysis for the last 2 years, odor investigation plan, field investigation program, review of potential sources and collecting data using portable olfactometer, field sampling and analysis program, presentation of findings in a stakeholder meeting, reporting and recommending next steps and measures for odor control, and project coordination, meetings, outreach, and monthly updates. So based on what presented here, it's requested from the City Council in 2 separate staff reports to approve the MOU for the odor attribution study between the region Monterey, Monterey One Water, and the City of Marina, with the attachment of Exhibit A, which is the MOU. Approve a professional services agreement between the City of Marina and SCS Engineers for Environmental Services for the odor attribution study project, with an attachment of Exhibit A, which is the agreement. Authorize the city manager to execute the MOU subject to final review and approval by the city attorney. Authorize the city manager to execute the agreement on behalf of the city subject to final review and approval by the city attorney. Authorize the finance director to make necessary accounting and budgetary entries. That was my presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm available for any questions.
You're muted, Bruce.
Thank you, Sabir. You mentioned in your presentation it would take, I think, 7 months. Can you repeat that?
Yes.
Okay, 7 months. And then, not to get too far ahead of us, but on page 1 in the analysis of the next item, 11B, it mentions the study will be conducted over 9 months. So I think you had 7 months plus 4 months of, I guess, like compilation and writing work for a total of 11 months, but then it says 9 months in the next item we're going to get to. So can you confirm the number of months, or Brian or someone, that the study will take?
It's 7 months.
So, Mr.
What's it
Mayor,
type?
there was 7 months of study, and then I believe it was 3 months of analysis of the data and preparation of I think that's Sabir's daughter, but the study plan itself. So we're actually maybe looking at getting an actual month extra of work there.
Okay, so you just mentioned approximately 10 months, and we're going to see that it's 9 months in the next report, but just so that we know, it's in the 9th to 10th month ballpark. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. And the timing of it and the limitation on the months was to focus on the time of year when historically there have been more reports of odor concerns. And as we looked at the scope that was proposed and trying to refine that and focus it on something that would provide the best value to the community, we focused on trying to narrow that down to the months where the actual odors are occurring.
Okay. And you mentioned in your report, Sabir, that SCS would be doing the engineering services. So who will be doing the study? Are the environmental services including writing all the reports, the whole A to Z? Or will someone else be doing the study, and then the engineering services are going to be providing the data and the data crunching, et cetera?
I think the SCS will do the environmental services, so it's they will be responsible for whole the study.
So
Did
the
I
cities,
answer your question?
kind of. So who will be on the city or M1 or region to oversee the study and review for, editing purposes, the final product, the draft products? Sorry.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is a study, it's an agree, the next council agenda item will be an agreement with SES and the city of Marina. So it's between them and us. SES will be conducting the study for the city. The city will be reviewing. Ultimately, you know, as we looked at the scope, we negotiated the scope. The scope was negotiated with Monterey Bay Air Resources District and Monterey County Environmental Health and the city of Marina and representatives of the residents of city of Marina. And that scope was refined with that group. And then, before we actually said, hey, okay, this is okay, we shared it with Monterey One and Regen and said, hey, do you see any issues with this? And just because they're stakeholders in providing funding for the study itself. And so, yeah, I think we have buy-in from everyone, but I think we have a solid scope of work that's going to yield unbiased results. And it is an agreement between the city and SCS Engineering.
Okay, so then I assume that SCS will be drafting the report documents that come out of this, and then who will be reviewing the draft before it's finalized?
The city will be reviewing the draft, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Will the public or the city council or Regen or M1 Water be seeing the draft or only the final?
I think we've engaged stakeholders from Marina residents throughout the process. And I think we will continue to engage those residents for input in the process. And then when the report is actually ready to present, there is one, in the scope of work, there is one presentation for the stakeholders in the community. And I think that's what will come out of it.
Okay. And the table of contents ahead of time and how the method, will the public have any access, or Regen or Monterey One Water, to what the study is going to do in detail? Because tonight we're not talking about details, we're just talking about organization, sort of. But will public or anyone outside of SCS and city staff have input to the study methodology, the timing? Well, that's part of the methodology, but so the guts of the study, will anyone have any input before the study launches and ends?
Mr. Mayor, I would say yes. I think those same core group of residents that are concerned about the odors will be involved in that review. I think that input will be valuable. But the result of this process is we've identified professionals that have done these studies in numerous locations under various different conditions. And I think, staff is recommending a well-qualified consultation firm, but we will continue to engage the stakeholder group within the community. And that as that goes forward. And I think, that will provide the best result.
All right. Is there one document that's going to explain how the study is going to, the methodology, et cetera, prior to the launch of the study?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there's going to be a document on the kind of the study or the sampling, how they intend to go about the sampling. Also not only that, but how the data will be addressed once it's tested, and how that will go into forming the results.
All right. Would it gum up the works too much at some point to say, hey, there's a 15-day comment period on the methodology before we launch this program? Yeah, does that gum up the works too much?
I think it would impact the cost of the study, we have recommended people that are qualified to do this type of work. They come in with no real bias on how to conduct this study. And, I know there's been a lot of concern in the community, but I think I don't know, what the value of that would be. We could take that sidetrack and see what the public has to comment on. I would say the people that are involved from the stakeholder community, have some experience with these types of experience with agricultural and scientific type studies, and we value their input.
Okay. Right now, I'm having trouble envisioning how that select group would be involved, but that's enough for now. We'll hear from public comment and I'll think more about that. Let's go on to Councilmember Christina Medina Dirksen, and thank you, Brian, for answering my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Saber, for your information. I have two questions to ask. One was, I really appreciate the mayor's public comment concerns. Is there a way to include the, there is a core group of concerned citizen. Is there a way to expand that beyond those that are already in the know? There was an article in the newspaper today, and I know that people are concerned, and I would like to know if it's possible to expand the people of interest.
So what do you mean by expand to the people of interest? Are you wanting to open up to anybody in the public that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if we're being told it's going to cost a little bit more for a comment period, which I highly support, even if it costs a little bit more money, it behooves us to do as thorough a process. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. Now, there's a couple of things like the scope of work includes public comment periods for the public to comment. What it also provides is once they have the preliminary findings, and these are draft findings, if we would look at those on our end. I'm sure that Regen will be part of that, Monterey One Water will be part of that, and that core group will be part of that. And that is just to review the preliminary findings and to be sure that it's covering the areas that we're looking at, that we're identifying the odors, and that it makes sense. But once we get beyond those preliminary findings, then the scope of work does call for public meetings where the public can look at it, give their input, review it, and all that before we have a final document.
Does that also include the methodology used? I know Brian said you have experts here. But
the scope of work actually, it talks about the methodology, and they've worked quite a bit with our partners in developing that. Some of that is meeting with them to identify the potential sources. There's this whole component of the meteorological side of understanding the wind patterns, where they are, and those different things. And so that has already been addressed in the scope of the study of all those complex things that are identified. The original proposal actually that came back was well over $300,000. And this is kind of what Brian was talking about it as we tried to pare the scope down, because what it is doing, it's sampling a certain number of samples out there. And so you're not guaranteed that you're going to have that odor on that one day that they're out there doing the sampling. And this is why they're identifying all the potential sources ahead of time. They're looking at all that meteorological data and making their estimates of, okay, these are the best times that we're going to be doing the samples. And I can't remember how many number of samples, but that is what is built into the study for $150,000. But as we get through that, if we are not getting the data that we want, or if for whatever reason we have an odd winter, and that typically that's when we have the odors, If we aren't getting the results or we aren't finding the odors, then we may need to expand the study. And we've talked with Regen and Monterey One Water that we may need to do additional sampling, so that the scope of the work kind of has already identified that methodology, and that core group has reviewed that, and the experts in Monterey One Water and Regen have worked that, and Brian and Saber have also reviewed that. So I think we're pretty comfortable with the scope of the project right now.
Is
Yeah,
there
and-
a question, Brian? How would you create a benchmark, or how would how do we create how do we find a benchmark when it is such an elusive thing that occurs? And also, does this include not just atmospheric but ground sampling too? Ground sniffing, samples.
So I think that the benchmark is really the industry standards for sampling odors and identifying odors. And yeah, SCS is well versed in that. I guess kind of tagging on to the last line of questioning, if there are members in the community that are well versed in these types of studies, we would certainly welcome them on like a citizen group to comment on these. But there's been plenty of, there have been opportunities to comment on this. There have been numerous reports to the Monterey Bay Air Resources District of odor incidents, and the public has provided input on it as to when these things are occurring. We're recommending that we bring the experts on because we want to definitively answer those questions, and it's not really necessarily a political question or a matter of opinion. We want to get the scientific answer to these questions. So if there are members of the public that have experience in that, I think there would be valuable input in the process.
Can we then include, or do we already have a page on our website, or how would interested people interested people let us know that they would like to be part of the process, or like we have had for other major projects across our city? Is it possible to include a link or some social media outreach?
Yes, absolutely, Council Member. We don't want to lose out on this opportunity. The study is going to be going forward. We do want to provide that information to our residents, and we want to direct those comments, or if they're experiencing odors, to the right people. MBARD is always the kind of clearinghouse for these concerns, and
What is MBARD?
Monterey Bay Air Resources District. We've had an odor complaint within the last few days. And I know when they come through because it triggers a whole stream of emails between MBARD and all the agencies operating north of Marina. So it's well connected. Those concerns will be heard and responded to and documented. And over the last few years, those documented concerns will become data for SCS to identify patterns and identify the times when they will plan for their sampling of odors.
I have one last question. Thank you for your answers. Speaking of emails, there was an email that was received, I read today, that there was a concern about a person on the team who was a previous director and now is a consultant. Have the team members been vetted for any conflicts of interest? And should we be apprised of that?
Yes, Council Member. Staff, as well as all the people involved as far as stakeholders providing money, have been well aware of changes at Regen Monterey, and with staff members moving to FCS. It was a question of concern during the proposal and review process, directly addressed to the FCS team in their proposal. No members of Regen Monterey or Monterey Regional Waste Management District, as they were formerly known, are on the team and will be involved in the study.
Brian, that includes any former employees or managers will not be involved in the study.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor, but not involved or in any position to influence the study.
Thank you very much for answering that question. I have no more at this moment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have I have several, but they may be very short. So let me just go through them, and if you can answer them as we go along. On the evaluation committee, there was one public representative. Is it possible to know who that was, or is that confidential?
I don't know this confidential. It was Greg Simmons.
Great.
He's been very involved in the process. I think staff met initially
Yes.
with the 3 members of the community, and they all felt that Greg Simmons would be the best
Yes.
representative.
Well, that was what I was hoping the person was. So thank you. And there might be some further use of Greg in the future. Certainly in public comment, but do we have any other roles for him to play in this process?
I think Mayor Pro Tem, given the experience of Greg and his input to this point, he's been very valuable in the process, and we will continue to engage Mr. Simmons.
Great. And I hope you do suggest ways in which he can concretely, rather than, sort of a passive, I hope he steps up, because he won't know exactly, how he can step up. Okay. And then on page 2, so you talk about using the complaint data as, part of the SCS database, and the complaints over the last 2 years. How many actual complaints is that?
Mayor Pro Tem, honestly, I can't answer that. They're collected by MBARD and will definitely be made available. I see the emails come across, but I haven't been keeping count.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because I think it could be 50 or it could be 300, and I would really like to know how many have been registered with MBARD. So if you don't have,
I think the 50 number is probably closer to reality. It's not 300.
okay.
The events in a year, I would be actually, it's probably closer to 20.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. And of course, that's only people who know the number to call and feel that they, if they call, the information would be maintained and utilized. But along those same lines, there are 2 data point collections, it looks like, and I am not quite sure if they're the same, but on page 2 and 3. So the first one says that there's going to be 2 days conducting initial odor inspections, and that's with this olfactometer. And so that's one data point, plus using the 20 or so complaints. But then on task 1.4, 2.0, it talks about the field investigation program, and this will take place approximately 2 weeks in the winter season. And is that using that olfactometer, or is that some other different methodology?
We're getting into kind of the technical details of the actual study itself. I'm going to say we do have Patrick Sullivan from SCS here that may be able to answer that a little bit more accurately than I may be. Some of that is to inform the plan for the studies, and some of that is actually the studies that, themselves, the sampling themselves. So I don't know if we can promote Patrick Sullivan to the panel.
I'm not a technical person, but I just want to understand, how many data points are we planning for, because it's on this document. But just to get an idea, are we looking at the 2 days plus some more within 2 weeks before the winter season?
Okay, there you go.
So, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks for having me. I think the question at hand was the difference between the portable olfactometer as part of task one. So recall, task one is the kind of initial data gathering screening task where we're collecting information on complaints, collecting information on meteorological data. We're doing the field survey. And during that analysis and during those 2 days in the field, we're going to just use a portable olfactometer. It's really a screening level device. It's called the nasal ranger. It tries to mimic what happens in an odor lab with an odor panel, but it does it in the field. So it doesn't have the same level of accuracy, but it gives us some screening level analysis.
Okay.
We will go to the different facilities and go to each of the sources at those facilities as well as in the neighborhood. And
Okay.
it's part of the screening. When we go to task two, that's now actually sampling and analysis. So we're going to collect samples and send them to an odor lab to have them analyzed for odor. And we'll literally have multiple samples over multiple days of sampling. I think in total, there's 100+ samples that'll get ultimately analyzed there. So that is a much more rigorous analysis, but we use the first task to help us kind of hone in on where we should put those sample locations, what are the most critical locations to sample, both near the sources as well as in the neighborhood. And because the winter has been the predominant period when we've had the worst odors, that's the period we decided to focus on. Because recall, this is an odor attribution study. We're trying to figure out, frankly, who's doing what to whom. And so we want to go when the odors are the worst, because that's going to give us the most information about where those odors are coming from and how they're potentially getting to the locations and communities where people are smelling them and obviously being forced to complain about that. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit between the two types of kind of analysis in the field. And I know there are questions about how we kind of the steps in the process. There will be at each one of those steps, as has been noted, we will present information. And obviously it's up to you who's on the receiving end of that information. We know it will be the city, we know it'll be stakeholders or whether there's members of the public. But after we complete the first task, there's information will be presented to the group that you guys designate, and we will summarize the results of that first task. We already have an outline for how we're going to do the second task, the sampling task, but we could alter that based on the results of the first task. So that's always a possibility. And we would obviously let you know if that came to pass. If we saw something in our initial data review that said, you know what, we need to kind of change our initial strategy and maybe adjust it. But there would be an opportunity to present that information, receive feedback, and then the next step is the development of the sampling plan. So again, that's another step where a deliverable will be created in draft form. You would get to review that. And that would be a very detailed summary of the actual sampling program and what we're going to do. So with the kind of brief kind of outline that's in the proposal and turn that into a true sampling plan.
Great. Thank you. That was very, very helpful description.
Okay.
And I think that I feel pretty confident when you say that in those 2 weeks or whatever that you were looking at 100 samples. Now, in getting those samples, I know you've probably got all kinds of very technical methodologies to run those samples through, but because we got the one letter from a person in the public about this LFG landfill gas wells, I think it was Regen that responded to that and said that those are really studies that are routinely done on their end. Is that something that you access that data specifically, or do you run your own LFG well studies?
So we know a lot about landfill gas. It's one of my company's expertise. So
Okay.
when we already know that landfill gas is a potential source of odor, right? I mean, there's chemicals in the landfill gas that are very common, in contributing to odor from a landfill. So that is clearly one of the sources that we would be focusing on as potentially the source of odors in the community. The sampling we're doing is not going to be specific to landfill gas or to any specific source. It's actually sampling for odors. The analysis is done by an odor lab using an ASTM methodology, and then trying to match that to the individual sources that we will have tested as well. And so it'll be that correlation between samples collected in the neighborhood where the odors are being smelled to the sources that we've tested as well. And then based on that correlation, hopefully we've identified one or more. And I want to be clear, it could be more than one source. Odors in communities are commonly a combination of sources that may be contributing to those odors. So it may not be, oh yes, it's this one single source. So landfill gas certainly will be something we'll be considering. We're not going to touch the landfill gas system or do any sampling directly from the landfill gas system, but we will be looking for odors that come from landfill gas emissions.
Okay, now because this gas is being routinely collected, and I don't have the was it Regen that responded, Brian, to your so Regen is normally collecting that data. Is that useful to you have their documents, because I'm sure they've been doing this for a very long time? Is that something that can be folded into your databases and resources?
We'll have a data request both for Regen as well as M1W about
Great.
Not only their sources and the activities they do for monitoring or anything, but if they've done any of their own odor studies, which I understand at least Regen has done something. I'm not completely sure about M1W. We will review that. Now we have to take everything with the proverbial grain of salt, and take a biased look. People that do their own studies saying they do anything, with a bias, but we have to recognize that there could be, but they may have good data in there. So certainly our data requests will include information that those facilities have generated.
Great. Now, Brian just said that MBARD is the agency that most of our public can call to register a complaint. And my question is, I know you have a certain designated period of sample collection, but if someone during the study period calls MBARD, will you respond also and follow up, or is this just left as another complaint log in, rather than, is this another opportunity for you to say, oh, this is interesting, this is outside of our 2 weeks of sampling, maybe we should look into it if it occurs a month later or whatever?
So a couple of things. We wouldn't really have the capabilities to follow up on every complaint that comes in and go out and try to sample on that exact day. We will again do that pre-screening and come up with the conditions that we believe are most likely to lead to odors.
Okay.
We will collect, if there's nothing there, we're not going to collect samples on that day, and we'll come back a subsequent day. But we don't really have the ability to respond in real time. And frankly, even if we did, we might not, if you don't get there soon enough, odors can be very, fleeting. And by the time you actually could get there in some amount of time, you still might miss it. So I think it's best to, and again, we're sampling over multiple days. So we're not just going out for a day, and those days aren't necessarily consecutive.
Right.
The sampling program is meant to go over the winter season and attempt to identify conditions, specifically meteorological conditions. And so how we work that is, in task one, we've reviewed the meteorological data. We've tried to correlate meteorological data with complaints and the number of complaints, and we kind of see what wind conditions basically tend to have most of the odor complaints occur. And that tells us, now that could be certain wind directions, or combinations of wind directions and wind speeds, or maybe inversions, whatever those conditions are. And then we have that information, so we know when these odors are most likely to occur. And that happens in this initial phase, task 1, which hopefully will start right away in October. And so when the winter seasons comes, we're ready to go sample. Sample, well, our meteorologist is going to forecast. So he's going to forecast forward, looking for those same conditions that we've already identified are the most likely to cause odors. And so when he forecasts several days out, he'll say, okay, Monday, Tuesday of this week is not really going to likely be conducive, but I think Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it looks like those conditions are occur. So that's when we would schedule the sampling of that. Now, if we get to Wednesday morning and, a new system came in unexpectedly, which can happen certainly on the coast, we're going to call it off, because obviously we're not going to go out and sample in conditions now that are not going to be conducive to odor. So there is a little bit of trial and error, but we're pretty good at it. We've done it a lot. So we know how to forecast and try to hit that sweet spot. So we absolutely are looking for odors. The worse, the better. I'm sure the facilities won't want to admit that, but that's what we want to find, right? Because that makes it a lot easier to identify the source of the odors when there's significant odors are occurring. So
Okay, well,
that's how we do it.
Thank you very much. It's been very, very helpful. Thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let's go to Councilmember Lisa Berkeley.
Thank you. I hear, and based on what I've read and what I've heard this evening, I think you all have done a very, very thorough job in preparing this. And so I'd actually like to make a motion that we go out per what's written here on the agenda, that we adopt resolution number 2022, approving the MOU from the odor attribution study between Regen Monterey, Monterey One Water, and the city of Marina. And we authorize the city manager to execute the amendments subject to final review and approval by the city attorney. And 3, we authorize the finance director to make necessary accounting and budgetary entries.
I'll second. Okay, so Lisa, do you have any other input at this time?
No, thank you.
All right. I think that we're missing something important, but I could be wrong. I'm a layperson when it comes to what we're talking about tonight. But the single most important thing for me would be that we would have somebody on call locally who could respond immediately when there was an odor report. I am concerned that if we did pre-planned 2 weeks, however many days of sampling, and then we have no help for the people when they call in strong odors, that we may be missing the prime opportunities to get to the heart of the issue. So I'd always hope that this study's primary component would be having someone to go check when it's happening. So we could say we had 20 reports and 12 of them we were able to identify the source. Here were the sources. But you're an expert in this field, Patrick. So what do we do if the majority of your days don't detect odors? Mr. Mayor, frankly, I haven't had that happen before. So, I mean, we're always able to predict, because we're doing the preliminary work and it gives us that good basis of when these conditions were going to occur. And then we do the forecasting. We call it off if the conditions aren't conducive. And frankly, if we get out there and we in over the first several days, for example, we think these are the exact perfect conditions and we're not smelling odors, then we may take a step back and say, okay, what do we need to reassess? So we clearly are not going to continue to go out and sample day in and day out over a period of time if we're not detecting any odors. And while we're there collecting samples, we're smelling things too, right? We're not just blindly collecting the samples. We're confirming that, yes, there's odors being detected at these locations, and therefore we have something to sample. So I'm pretty comfortable that we will every day that we sample find something. Probably not. But that's why we do it over multiple days and spread those days. Again, they're not just going to be a set number of days and we only sample those days. They'll be forecasted days. We could forecast and then we could go 2 weeks and the winds aren't going to be right. So we won't sample for 2 weeks and then we'll come back out again until we get those conditions. So, okay. Well, maybe the public will have more input on that. And my last question at this point is Tim Flanagan, who was the former general manager of Monterey Regional Waste Management District, now Regen Monterey, came up with the idea just before departing, retiring, that it would be really good when odors were reported for a phone tree to occur where the potential odor sources were contacted to see, what are you doing at this moment that the odor is being reported? Or what were you doing if it's on a weekend? What were you doing on Saturday at 5 o'clock, so that there could be some correlation between activities that might be generating odors or not, and the odors themselves. But that would be most effective, of course, if the potential entities were ready to reply. So on Monday, they had kept track over the weekend. So I think most agencies know what's going on when they turn the compost or when they covered the landfill or different major actions. So what is the potential for doing something like that? So when odors are detected either in your sampling or by the public, that there become some kind of a phone tree to try to correlate what activities that these entities were conducting at the time the odors were detected.
Mr. Mayor, I'll answer that question. And I would say that that process is already in place. Whenever an odor is reported to Monterey Bay Air Resources District, it generates an email from the district to Monterey One Water, Regen Monterey, Keith Day composting operation, as well as agricultural people that are active in north of Marina. And they're all made aware of it. And they've been very good about responding back with, meteorological data on that day, what their operations were on that day, if there was anything out of the ordinary that they were doing on that day that might have contributed to odors. So, I think the process is in place as long as people report to Monterey Bay Air Resources District.
Are the last couple of years of such responses available for public review?
I would believe so, Mr. Mayor. We're going to be providing those to SCS. They would be available through Monterey Bay Air Resources District. I would think they would be a public record, but we'll definitely be providing those records to SCS for their study.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's go to Councilmember Lisa Berkeley. Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Cafabiala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These are just two administrative kind of questions. On one of the analyses for either of these two resolutions, it says that Regen and Monterey Water may elect to pay the city all or portions of their share in advance of expenses incurred. And I wonder if that's going to be possible. Otherwise, we would be out $150,000 for maybe 10 months. Is that something that is happening? So we would get an advance? Maybe it's Lane or Juan.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I'll just add that clause was added because I believe Monterey One Water was interested in advancing the funds just from, budgetary and management standpoints. Maybe Lane and Juan can respond to kind of the city's ability to cover the expenses until the reimbursement.
Yeah, this is the reason why we have the MOU. So it's a contract, it's an agreement. And so when we incur those expenses, then we'll immediately invoice Monterey One Water and Regen. And if they want to advance us the money in advance, that's fine. But otherwise, we'll just invoice them as soon as that task is completed. And I don't worry about that because we do have the MOU agreement in place.
Okay, but so we're not going to get an invoice at the end of 10 months, that we're going to get tasks completed invoices, so it's going to be split up.
Correct.
That's
We
correct,
will
Mayor
invoice-
Pro Tem. There will be progress payments and invoicing throughout the process.
Okay, thank you so much. Then a while back, and I for the life of me can't remember, I saw a really good, in one of our contract proposals, a clause for non-discrimination that was really good. And it was much more than what you usually see when you see a short paragraph on this. And I had at that time asked if the city could incorporate that kind of language in our future contracts. And I don't see that present. So I don't remember what it was, but it was one contract that really sort of communicated a seriousness about non-discrimination in our city contracts.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, I do recall using that in other contracts. We can definitely present that to SCS as far as inclusion in this contract. It's typically not a concern or a problem with the agencies or consultants that we deal with, but we'll definitely present that to them for their consideration.
Right, and I think it's just a matter of the city communicating that it's important to us. Whether we ever have a problem, I think that if people see that language, then they know that it's not just a perfunctory paragraph that they do because they're required to do it. So if you wouldn't mind, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, let's go to public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter, please raise your hand. Denise Turley, welcome.
Good evening. The only question that I could think up of is, so they collect the data and the data isn't related to the smell, but maybe it's a violation of air pollution standard or something like that. Is that data reported to the appropriate agency? And will the public be told that that data occurred on that date? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Denise. Elizabeth Vischer, welcome back.
Yes, good evening again. Just one question, and I apologize if I've missed it because I had to step away for a little while. Who will pay if the cost will be more than $150,000? Thank you.
Ryan McCarthy, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, this is an issue I've been tracking for quite a while now. I just want to thank you, Mayor Delgado, and the council for your thorough questions, and also, Mayor, your representation on the landfill board as well. And to the city, Brian McMahon, some of your city staff, on your thoughtfulness on kind of including city residents in this issue. I think it's a really fantastic example of how involving residents can really strengthen the process. I think the worst outcome is that this study would come back inconclusive because of a variety of possible conditions. I hope that's not the case. And I do think SES is up to the task of really trying diligently to attribute odors that our community complains about. I just want to be clear about that, and I think we're all on the same page, but just to be sure, this is about odors that generate complaints from our community at large, right? It's not about odors that other communities complain about. It's not about the wonderful strawberry smell that occurs in the spring. It's not about other odors. It's really about those odors generated by complaints from our community. And so, again, I think we're on the same page about that, but I just kind of wanted to say that for the record. The other thing I want to say is I hope SES really understands our unique microclimates. As I speak right now, wind in Monterey is blowing from the south, and then yet at the landfill, it's kind of blowing from the west or the north, almost exact opposite direction. So I hope there's some idea that maybe a wind station might be actually placed at the landfill, and that pretty robust wind and meteorological data can be collected to really understand what's going on. Because I do think it's complex here, and I don't know how that compares to other jurisdictions that SES has done work in. But I do think it's important to understand. And I think that's the brunt of my comments. Again, I appreciate how this process has unfolded. You know, it's unfortunate. I think that we're at this point. I don't know that it was necessary, but sometimes, you know, we've got to do what we've got to do to get everyone on board. And I'm really hopeful that this study provides some of that data. Thank you.
Greg Simmons, welcome.
Looks like Greg is muted.
We'll come back to Greg if you're having technical difficulties. Let's go to Tommy Bolea.
Good evening, Mayor and city staff. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. February 1st and February 2nd, 2022, the winds were north to south. And those 2 days were the worst smelling days that I've ever experienced. It covered all the Marina and well into Fort Ord. Something happened on that day, and I made phone calls to figure out what, but evidently during February or wintertime, winds do shift. It changes the opposite. Either the air is stagnant, other than if we have storms during the winter. But if there's no storm and high pressure is present, winds shift, they go the opposite, such as on the 19th of this month. It was weird. The winds were not going from west to east. It was going east to west. And you put a little south into that, and you've got you know, off-gassing. Now, methane is odorless, but it's highly flammable. It's very volatile, so you have to be careful. As far as I know, the calls that I made, based on what I heard, that dump is not a closed loop system, meaning if things leach out of the ground, it may leach out. And they have sensors there that they monitor, but it's the smell. Now that's a combination of gases. It's not basically healthy, but as Marina grows, you're going to have more garbage. That's a 100-year dump, 100 years. Everything from Watsonville to Big Sur gets dumped there in Marina. And if Santa Cruz runs out of space, then Santa Cruz is going to end up dumping into Marina. So they have more methane. Now, what do they do with that methane? Well, they don't burn it 1 hour a day or 10 minutes a day. They burn it 24 hours a day. They have too much methane. You can't release methane back in the air. This is what's leading to global warming. It's 10 times worse than car exhaust by far. That and the waste treatment plant are the two worst places you don't want to be near. Only thing that I know of that's closed loop is maybe that food digester, because now we're collecting all food scraps. But everything else has been there for the beginning of time. And if that's not in a closed loop system, then there's going to be a leak here, a leak here, a leak there. And the other thing you need to consider is the behind, and needs to be studied, is behind Moss Landing Power Plant, there's a dairy farm there. Boy, talking about off-gassing.
Excuse me,
there.
Tommy, can you please restrict your comments to the two documents we're talking about tonight?
Okay, well, now you threw me off, but you got to look at that. There's a lot of off-gassing there. There could be off-gassing in the slough.
Tommy,
from
we're
chemical-
restricted. We're not talking about Moss Landing unless you think that the odors from Moss Landing are what Marina residents are
Okay,
smelling.
then you need to give me some more time back because you took away some of my time. Can I have 30 more seconds at least?
Please give him 15 more seconds, but Tommy, please keep your comments pertinent.
Okay, as the area grows, that dump and the waste treat. Okay, let's just talk about if you're just doing the study on the dump. There's so much off-gassing going on now with the recycling of all the whatever wood chips and all that. Everything is off-gassing, and the right wind. As you build more north, that's going to be a real critical issue. There's definitely something going on there. I know it's not a closed loop system, but I did a lot of reading during the pandemic, and that is far worse than car exhaust. Even if we took all the car exhaust out, it's only 50%. The other 50% of those facilities, and they're nationwide. And that's what's causing global warming. Good evening.
Grace Silva Santella, and then we'll go to Greg Simmons.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. You can hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Hello.
I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Biala for the confidence that she expressed in Greg Simmons. Greg is a friend of mine, and he, myself, and Brian McCarthy have been very involved in this odor issue that we have been plagued with on the north side of Marina, and I have utmost confidence that Greg will be a fabulous citizen representative for us and did a fabulous job with Saber and Brian in getting to the place we are right now. I want to thank you very much that we are at the place we are right now. It was years ago that a former city council member who was a resident at the time, Adam Urrutia, would be posting on social media complaints about the odors and his fear for his family, especially his young children, and those odors continued for a number of years. It has subsided a bit, and I would say in part that's because of the last few years of the pandemic. We haven't had the restaurant food debris going out to our landfill here in Marina, but we're going to start having this uptick now that food debris from our residential homes are going to be going out to the landfill. So I want to thank you very much. I'm in complete support of your motion tonight, and I look forward to us moving forward on this and seeing the results in 7, 9, 10 months. Thank you very much.
Greg Simmons? Hello, Greg.
Yes. Yes, good evening. Thank you. I did have technical difficulties. Yes. First of all, I just want to say I was involved with our group, the kind of Northern Marina. It's an informal group of people that Grace just mentioned. We were involved early on with the discussions about the odor study. There's been a lot of, we were kind of, last several years, we were kind of a little bit pessimistic that we'd ever get anything done. But I'd say in about the last 2 years, there's been some good leadership coming out of the city, the mayor and others. And I also want to say that the work by Brian and Saber were just very professional and very inclusive, at least for our group, and very open-minded. So they did a very professional job with the RFP, and I was involved with reviewing the proposals, and it was nice to see those. SCF's proposal was by far the better proposal of the proposals that were received. They have a lot of experience in exactly the kind of problems that a community like ours have experienced in many other cities around the country, really, and they have local representation in California, so they're not far from us. And I was particularly impressed with how much emphasis they put on looking at meteorology and patterns, their ideas for using data from multiple sources of weather data, not just at the landfill, which is actually was a huge mistake. Early on, people were saying, well, the wind's not blowing the right way. It can't be causing the odor. Well, odor problems are much more complex than a single data point, and SCF actually very well represents that kind of thinking, including using models to kind of figure out where odors can go. And the fact that they're going to look at historical odor complaints and try to correlate with meteorological information, that's super important. Odors are actually hard to be in the right place at the right time, but the whole overall picture of the way they're going to do this, they're going to get a really good understanding. And I think just by the patterns, be able to suggest, well, these are probably the most likely sources. And at the end of the day, they also know the landfill composting industry really well. So I think that kind of expertise, coupled with the study they're planning in their report, they're planning to recommend mitigation and best management practices. So overall, I'm really very positive about where we've got to, the proposal we have in front of us, and I think we're on the right track. So I support this 100%. Thank you. And Kathy, I am willing to keep helping if asked to help on any of this matter. Thank you.
All right, we'll give everyone a couple of moments who haven't spoken to raise your hand if you wish to. Okay, public comments closed. Denise asked if air violations, not just odor type of observations, would be reported during the study if they were observed, and if the public would be told.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, the study is going to identify sources of odors, whether or not those are violations. I'm not sure. The results will definitely be shared with the Monterey Bay Air Resources District and Monterey County Environmental Health, and will be a document to kind of guide their activities and any potential enforcement that would come out of that. But I think the determination as to whether that was a violation would be up to those two agencies.
All right. And who would pay if the cost of the study went over 150,000? Is that a possibility?
Mr. Mayor, as I go into these things, I always consider that they may be a possibility. The memorandum of understanding provides for that potential. It provides for the city to meet and confer with Monterey One Water and Regen Monterey and say, hey, here's the situation. We went into this with a certain understanding. Certain parameters have changed, and now we're looking at this situation that requires a little bit more investment, and that would be the conversation with those agencies.
All right. Brian discussed the weather station location. What is the primary weather station that will be used for data collection?
I'm not the expert on that. I don't even know if Patrick is the expert on their panel, because they have a meteorologist that's on their team that might be able to better identify that.
Felipe Melchor, the current general manager of Regen Monterey, do you know if there's weather stations on site in the Monterey One Regen area? Go ahead, Felipe. All right. Well, maybe that's just, there's.
Good evening, Mayor, here I am, and members of the council. The weather station that's being used is being used from the airport in Marina at this current time, is what I'm aware of.
All right. Thank you. So maybe there could be some thought to whether that's an appropriate location. It sounds like it's pretty good. And I would guess it might take 10 to 20,000 to set up another weather station more close to where you might want it. But Patrick and Brian, what do you think about the weather data coming from the Marina Airport vicinity?
Well, Mr. Mayor, part of our task one is to review multiple data sets of meteorological data. That would just be one of them. We would look at other available data that's out there and decide what of that we think is the most representative that then we would use for further analysis. So our meteorologist, as been noted, would be the one making that analysis and making that kind of determination for use. Certainly the airport stations would be one of those, absolutely, but there are other stations that are in use and we would review any of them that we think has any relevance for this area. Also in our sampling, field sampling study, we have budget to put a temporary station up during the period of our sampling, and our meteorologists would determine where that would be best located to capture the wind conditions that we think are most relevant for, odors in the community. And I think one of the members of the public talked about the micro conditions for weather. We're well aware of that. It's pretty common in a lot of coastal communities to have those kind of conditions. And so, our meteorologist has already started looking into, making sure we accommodate for those conditions. And we well know that some facilities like landfill, just because of their size and their own topography, can actually create some unique conditions for meteorology. So that's all part of the review, and to determine what is the best meteorological data to represent this area, and particularly the movement of odors from the sources to into the community where they're being detected.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to a vote, any final comments from City Council? Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to clarify, are we just doing the motion for 11A and then I can make a motion later for 11B? Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. I would like to commend everyone involved, from Felipe and Tim before him, through the staff at Regen Monterey, and our city staff is taking on a lot of work when they're already got a full plate. Talking to Brian and others that are helping Brian, and to the public who have been instrumentally involved. Thank you very much. It's been a long time, as Brian McCarthy mentioned, to get to this point, and it's great that we're here. So thanks to everybody who's lent a hand. And Patrick, we wish you and your team all the success in doing the job that you have in front of you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to a roll call, please, Anita.
Councilmember Medina Dirksen,
Yes.
Councilmember Burnett, Councilmember Berkeley,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Biala,
Yes.
Mayor Delgado.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. The second and last action item should be very quick because it's the same issue. But Brian, do you have any presentation for this? Any comments?
Mr. Mayor, nothing else to add other than thanks to Saber Machinas. He kind of led out into this. He is an assistant engineer, and I would say this is not exactly vanilla for public works and engineers, but he was along for the process, and the process works and can be applied to things that are often not in line with the norm.
All right. Thanks again, Brian, to you for being willing to take this on, and Lane for you being willing for the city to take this on. Let's go to Kathy Biala, Mayor Pro Tem, for our motion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2022 whatever, approving a professional services agreement between the City of Marina and SCS Engineers for environmental services for the odor attribution study project, authorizing the city manager to execute the agreements on behalf of the city, subject to final review and approval by the city attorney.
Second.
Okay, does any member of the public have any comment on this motion? Let's go to Tommy Bolea. Welcome back, Tommy. Sorry.
What was the motion on?
The motion was to approve an agreement between the city and SCS Engineers for the odor attribution study.
Well, there's many sources of off-gassing. So you're only going to do it for the dump, is that correct?
This is
Because
only
that's-
for the agreement, for the service agreement to hire this firm. That's what we're looking
Okay, okay. Is it specifically for the dump or other things like the waste treatment
it's-
plant?
Anybody, it's odor attribution.
Okay. And you couldn't get any other funding from other sources on this? Why is the city? This is more like, should be the county or the state. They're the ones that are off-gassing, causing problems. And then we have to pay, our government, our city limit has to pay for something that may be happening outside our jurisdiction. That to me, that doesn't make sense, but it sounds like you're going to go forward on this and you're going to spend this amount of money, and they're monitored. Look at their reports. It's already monitored daily. It's required by state law, any off-gassing that occurs at waste treatment facilities. I don't understand why we have to do the study. Sounds like they should be giving us the report. I mean, it's a public entity. They should be giving us, they're the ones creating the pollution and the greenhouse gases in vast amounts. And it's, as you know, the motion to that the city pay for this and move forward, I think it should be shared, or a federal or state level should be coming in on this. I mean, it's everybody's creating this problem. All the waste that's coming from all the different cities. It's just, it should be all shared. We all breathe the same air, don't we? I mean, but we are the ones that are paying for it. I mean, I think it should be more of a, you should look for other sources. The county air committee there, or whatever that's called. You have other agencies that are involved. They all hold responsibilities for our clean air. They're all mandated by the state of California. I mean, you're going to do this study, you're going to monitor it, and you're going to get some report. You mentioned 7 months, 9 months. You're going to have to cover the summer and as well into the winter, because air is stagnant, different weather. You got microclimates, like the gentlemen were saying. I mean, it just, to me, why we're picking up the tab. Is Marina the only one having the problem? I guess that's the other question. It just seems it's Marina's problem, I guess, but it's caused by some other entity, other outside the city limits. It just seems why we're paying for such. I understand we're growing north, but that's what you guys want to do. That dump is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. The gas ain't going to go away. You know, you can go forward on this proposal that you're proposing tonight, but then what are you going to do? You're going to find that you do have a problem. Then what? You have a problem. Now what? Now you have to figure out how to get out of it. And it's not rocket science. It's the worst air to breathe, period. And you're getting closer to it as you grow north. So you can't tell it to go away. It's there. And you can spend this money, but I think it should be shared by other entities. Good evening.
Okay, we'll give everyone a moment or two. If anyone hasn't spoken or wishes to, but wishes to, please raise your hand. Okay, we'll close public comment. And just to clarify, the city should not pay any money at all for this. It's a reimbursable as we go through this. Brian, our public works director, has explained that we will be invoicing the agencies paying for this study, but the city will be overseeing the study to remove any potential perception of biases or conflict of interest. So there'll be no potential odor producers involved in the study other than to cooperate when asked for information. And I would like to commend Regen Monterey. They have been making changes over the years, as has the composting facility, to reduce odors. So this is an iterative process where iteratively changes will continue to be made if the study concludes there are certain sources of odors that are detected. So we will move from there, but first we have to attribute where the odors are coming from, and that's the purpose of the study. And then we will have options to work on reducing those odors once we know where they're coming from. All right. Any final comments from council before we go to a vote? Anita, can you please give us a roll call?
Councilmember Medina Dirksen,
Yes.
Councilmember Burnett,
Yes.
Councilmember Berkeley,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Biala,
Yes.
Mayor Delgado.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. That motion passes unanimously. And again, thanks to everybody involved. That's our last action item. A couple of housekeeping type items on the agenda. The next one is mayor's meeting to not meet this past month. It'll be meeting at the start of October. And then does anyone have any questions or comments they want to make to clarify any activities they've been having, or ask staff for clarifying answers?
No.
City manager and maybe our fire chief. Unfortunately, we had yet another abandoned duplex burned down in Cypress Knolls, right next to the high school, the closest one to the high school, just a few nights ago. So we've had, I don't know, 6 or 8 this year, maybe more, I'm not sure. But my question is, have we changed our tactics at all to try to put the fires out, or do we still let them burn?
Doug, you're muted still.
I apologize. So the first thing we do for anything on these fires is to assess the life safety. So because we know there are people living in there, and so we will go out there and we will get the folks out, because that's our primary mission. Secondary is if we have like a small room and contents fire or something that we can put out with tank water on the engines, we'll put the fire out. You know, if it's beyond that, then we have to worry about it spreading. And it takes all our resources. We try to keep the fire contained. Now, we had another fire the other night and it rained. And so we had 2 issues to that fire. It's so overgrown out there. We can't, it's hard to get to the building to gain access. Even we eventually called Public Works out with some heavy equipment so we can gain some access around the building. But with the rain, it didn't allow the fire to burn hot. So then we had a lot of pockets of fire that smoldered. And the only way to get that in there and get that fire out is to dig it out. And we don't have an excavator to do that. So we are working on some other plans, and there's some other things that we want to do. One of our big hopes that we can at least get some access and rings around the building is with CAL FIRE bringing their bulldozer. But I understand that they have to have they're going through their process before they can help us. They may have to do a sequel. this before they could even drop a blade. And everybody, even if we can get some people to help trim, it's so overgrown out there in so many of these homes. It's very difficult. And we don't have the water. It's dangerous to be around. There's potholes, there's needles, it needs to be cleaned up or out there before we can do much.
Thank you very much, Chief. Ryan, last question on that. What's the date or the month that you think the 32 buildings bid for demolition will be gone?
Mr. Mayor, I can't speak to gone at this point. I would say by the end of the year, we could start to see those the barracks in those buildings start to be demolished. There's going to be abatement of hazardous materials between now and then that they have to do before they actually start tearing down the buildings. So there will be activity out there, but you won't see the buildings coming down until towards the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you. Similar and last question. What's the projected date of completion for the pump track and Martin Luther King statue at the library?
Mr. Mayor, the pump track has been delayed due to the wall features, a supply chain issue. I think we're looking at probably closer to the end of October for those wall features to be installed and the finished paving on it. I know there are a number of people involved, interested in a ribbon cutting ceremony, and we'll definitely be outreaching to all those people and making sure that we plan a great event for that momentous occasion. And then the Martin Luther King statue, I think we're at a 30% moving on into the final design documents on it. I think we're kind of facing some of the same contractor demand and labor issues with them. So I think we're probably be looking in kind of the late winter, early spring timeframe potentially for that project.
To launch or to complete?
Actually, Brian, on the October 4th council meeting, our next council meeting, Bianca will be making a presentation on the status of the MLK structure. We'll be presenting our final design, and she will have a timeline of the whole project. So you'll have that on our next council agenda.
All right, thank you both. Any questions, comments from other council members? Councilmember Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our recent MST board meeting, MST has embarked, well, I guess it's been around for a number of years. It is a van pool service, and I've asked them to coordinate with the city to put this on our next agenda. That's a really innovative idea to help folks get out of their cars and actually save some money. So I'm looking forward to the presentation. Hopefully, I think we can get it on our next council agenda.
Thank you. And David, you spurred me to think of something I think is important. The MST's proposed SURF bus rapid transit project to come through Marina is still in the information input stage, so that if people do have concerns or questions, the MST, Monterey Salinas Transit, is inviting people to provide their comments so that their concerns and questions can be addressed. So please get them into MST because they're project lead. They're the ones that will have the best information if you have ideas or questions or concerns. And thank you, David Burnett, Councilmember Burnett, for serving on MST as our representative for the city of Marina. Okay.
If I could follow up, Yeah, follow up on that, since we went into the SURF project. MST has held a number of, I think there's 47 presentations to councils, community groups for the last 18 months. And they are continually reviewing postcards, emails. I don't think they want you to call in, but if you do have some suggestions or concerns about the project, please don't hesitate. You can go to the mst.org website, and they actually have a form there, interactive form that you can fill in your concerns, or you can just send them an email. But they really want to get this project right. And there was a couple of interesting updates in the last go round that calmed some of my concerns. I still have a few concerns, but calmed most of my concerns. So just be sure to, if you do have concerns, to let them know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, then I think we are adjourned, and have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone.